Boys, see what we caught: another vagrant who believes the sidewalk is his. As Detective Gavin Strickland stood over Xavier Booth, who sat quietly against the brick wall under the midday sun, the radio crackled. Xavier sat on the ground in a green hoodie with his blue jeans worn and ripped. His beard was unkempt, and beside him lay his sign, "Anything helps." As Strickland leaned over, a noticeable gleam flashed from his polished badge. He asked in a sneering voice, "What's your name, friend? Time to clean up this neighborhood trash." But as Strickland reached for his handcuffs, Xavier spoke for the first time, his voice steady and professional. "Detective Strickland, badge number 4472. You're currently being recorded for Internal Affairs Investigation 2024-087. Strickland froze. The homeless man's eyes were suddenly sharp, calculating, nothing like the broken vagrant he'd appeared to be moments before. "Welcome to Frost Folktales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background." 3 weeks prior, FBI Director Philip Grayson sat across from Xavier Booth inside the conference room on the 20th floor of the federal building. Natural light poured in through the enormous windows as Grayson placed files on the table. The director's expression was solemn as he pushed forward a considerably thick folder toward Xavier. He was dexterous in blue suit. "Agent Booth, we have a situation that requires your attention at the 12th Precinct in Metro City. In 6 months, 17 corruption complaints dealt with, which all were dismissed by Internal Affairs. Abuse of authority, civil rights violations, tampering with evidence. The entire department is corrupt from inside to outside." Xavier Booth was dressed in his regular FBI polo shirt and dark blue jacket, with his eyes engaging the files. At 42, he was the Bureau's most decorated undercover specialist. 15 years of taking down crime families, terrorist cells, and corrupt politicians. Even though people respect a muscular and alert physical appearance, it is the mind that makes one legendary. "What is the plan, Director?" Grayson leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Deep cover. You go in as a homeless veteran named Marcus Johnson. We've got the backstory ready, fake military discharge papers, even a criminal record to explain why you're on the streets. The corruption centers around Detective Gavin Strickland and his crew. They're running protection rackets, skimming drug money, and brutalizing anyone who can't fight back." Xavier absorbed every detail as Grayson continued. "Your handler will be Agent Monica Briggs. She'll maintain visual surveillance from a coffee shop 2 blocks from your position. Her casual appearance will help her blend with the neighborhood crowd. This isn't just about getting evidence, Booth. These officers are violating constitutional rights daily, and their victims are predominantly Black and Hispanic residents who feel powerless to fight back." The weight of the mission settled on Xavier's shoulders like a familiar burden. "How long do you estimate for full infiltration?" Grayson shrugged, his blue jacket catching the afternoon light. "However long it takes. But Booth, understand, this isn't just surveillance. You'll be completely vulnerable out there. No backup, no extraction team standing by. If they make you, you're on your own until we can mobilize." Xavier nodded slowly, already mentally preparing for the transformation ahead. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow morning. Agent Briggs will brief you on surveillance protocols and emergency signals. Your fake identification documents are being finalized tonight. Once you're on those streets, you become Marcus Johnson completely. No breaking character, no matter what they throw at you." The next 3 weeks tested every skill Xavier had developed in his FBI career. Sleeping in alleys, eating from dumpsters, enduring the casual cruelty of officers who saw him as less than human. But his trained eye caught everything. Detective Strickland's weekly meetings with drug dealer Ramon Vega, the envelope of cash that changed hands every Tuesday behind the abandoned warehouse, Officer Curtis Langley planting evidence on teenagers whose only crime was existing while black, Captain Ronald Hester destroying incident reports that documented excessive force complaints. Agent Monica Briggs maintained her position at Cafe Luna, her red sweater and dark jeans helping her appear like any other neighborhood regular. She documented every interaction through telephoto lens, building a visual record of the systematic corruption Xavier witnessed firsthand. Their communication was limited to subtle hand signals and predetermined meeting locations, but Xavier knew she was always watching, always ready to call for federal backup if the situation turned deadly. The evidence mounted daily. Xavier memorized license plate numbers of unmarked cars used for illegal surveillance. He noted times, dates, and exact conversations as Strickland's crew divided money stolen from crime scenes. The pattern was clear. They targeted vulnerable populations who wouldn't be believed if they reported abuse. Homeless veterans, undocumented immigrants, recovering addicts, anyone society already viewed with suspicion. But gathering evidence meant enduring the constant dehumanization. Officers would walk past Xavier's corner, making comments about cleaning up human garbage. Strickland himself had stopped several times, always finding excuses to search Xavier's belongings, to run his fake identification through the system, to assert dominance over someone he perceived as powerless. At this Tuesday afternoon, with the sun-warmed brick wall at his back, Xavier became aware of the familiar weight of the small recording device in the lining of his jacket. Agent Briggs sat at her usual window table 50 yards away. Her red blouse was visible through the cafe glass as she pretended to read a magazine while keeping the street in her peripheral vision. Detective Strickland's radio made noise while he heard Xavier's words. "Registering? What the hell are you talking about, homeless?" His voice had the particular edge cops develop when their authority gets tested, but Xavier saw the flicker of uncertainty in his pale blue eyes. Xavier remained seated, his posture deliberately non-threatening despite the bombshell he just dropped. Internal Affairs Case Number 2024-087, Detective. 3 weeks of documented corruption, bribery, and civil rights violations. You want to add intimidating a federal informant to your charges. The color drained from Strickland's face as he stepped back, hand instinctively moving toward his service weapon. His long-sleeved uniform shirt showed sweat stains despite the cool afternoon air. "You're insane. Some crazy homeless guy playing games won't save you from vagrancy charges." But Xavier could see the wheels turning behind Strickland's eyes. The detective was remembering every interaction, every casual conversation within earshot, every envelope of dirty money exchanged while this seemingly broken man sat nearby. The cognitive dissonance was almost visible as Strickland struggled between dismissing Xavier as delusional and confronting the possibility that he'd been under surveillance for weeks. Xavier pulled out a small digital recorder, holding it where Strickland could see the red recording light. "Everything's been documented, Detective. Every payoff, every planted evidence case, every time you and your crew violated someone's constitutional rights because you thought they couldn't fight back." Strickland's hand moved to his radio, calling for backup with barely controlled panic in his voice. "Unit 47 to dispatch. Need immediate assistance at 5th and Meridian. Got a possible mental health situation. Suspect claiming to be working with Internal Affairs." The irony wasn't lost on Xavier. After 15 years of FBI undercover work, taking down organized crime families and international terrorists, he was being dismissed as mentally ill by a corrupt cop whose entire criminal enterprise was about to collapse. But that was exactly what made this mission so crucial. The victims of Strickland's corruption had been dismissed the same way, their complaints ignored, their trauma minimized. Officer Curtis Langley arrived within minutes, his short-sleeved uniform and arrogant swagger immediately familiar to Xavier. Langley had been present for at least 6 documented instances of evidence tampering, always following Strickland's lead with eager brutality. "What's the situation, detective?" Strickland gestured dismissively at Xavier, who remained seated with the recorder still visible. "Homeless guy thinks he's working some undercover operation for IA. Probably saw too many cop shows while he was detoxing." Xavier met both officers' eyes steadily, his voice remaining calm and professional. "Gentlemen, I strongly advise you to contact Internal Affairs before this situation escalates. You're both already facing federal charges. Don't compound them with additional civil rights violations." The suggestion hit Strickland like a physical blow. Federal charges? The words hung in the afternoon air as traffic moved past on the busy street. Normal people going about normal lives, while Xavier sat at the center of a confrontation that would determine whether justice existed for society's most vulnerable members. Strickland's face twisted with rage and something deeper, the dawning realization that his careful criminal enterprise might actually be unraveling. He lunged forward, ripping the recorder from Xavier's hands and smashing it against the brick wall. The device shattered, plastic fragments scattering across the sidewalk like evidence of destroyed justice. "That's what I think of your recording, vagrant. Langley, get the zip ties. This nutcase is going downtown for a psychiatric evaluation." Xavier watched his evidence disappear without changing expression, but inside, he felt the familiar surge of controlled anger that had driven his entire career. They had just destroyed federal evidence while committing assault, adding new charges to their growing list of crimes. More importantly, they had revealed their true nature, choosing violence over accountability, brutality over basic human decency. As Langley moved toward him with restraints, Xavier remained seated, hands visible, posture non-threatening. His training told him to endure whatever came next, to gather more evidence, to let these corrupt officers dig their own graves deeper with every illegal action. But part of him, the part that had spent 3 weeks being treated as subhuman, wanted to reveal his true identity and watch their faces crumble. The man did not yell, but quietly spoke with 100% certainty. "Detective Strickland, badge 4472, Officer Langley, badge 3891, whatever you're about to do that's federal, their eyes are on you, recording it, building cases. The decision you make today is going to dictate if you're looking at life in federal prison or 20 years. As Langley was getting the restraints ready, Strickland reached for a nightstick and lowered his voice. "Your only view, vagrant, will be the inside of a padded cell." The afternoon sun continued beating down on the sidewalk as Xavier Booth, decorated FBI agent and protector of constitutional rights, prepared to endure whatever brutality these corrupt officers could deliver. Because sometimes justice required sacrifice, and sometimes the most powerful weapon against systematic oppression was the willingness to absorb its worst impacts while gathering the evidence needed to destroy it forever. In 50 yards away, Agent Monica Briggs watched through her telephoto lens, documenting every moment, every violation, every step that would eventually lead to federal indictments. The trap was closing, even as Xavier disappeared into the custody of the very criminals he was sworn to bring down. Detective Gavin Strickland looked down at Xavier Booth, who was sitting against the brick wall, and smiled cruelly. For 3 weeks, Xavier had been doing undercover surveillance on this part of sidewalk downtown, where sun already throwing some nasty shadows. The tattered blue jeans and green jacket of a homeless man reinforced his persona. Fit for documenting corruption of the 12th Precinct, Strickland, whose short-sleeved police uniform was moist with sweat despite the October coolness, said, "You think you're pretty smart, don't you? Recording Internal Affairs? You're just another crazy street rat who wants attention." Xavier remained seated, his hands visible and his voice steady. "Detective Strickland, I am Special Agent Xavier Booth, Federal Bureau of Investigation, badge number FB7439. I am conducting an authorized federal investigation into police corruption. I need you to step back and contact my supervisor, Director Philip Grayson." Strickland laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the surrounding buildings. FBI? You hear this guy, Langley? He gestured to his partner, Officer Curtis Langley, who had just arrived in a second patrol car. Langley was younger, maybe 30, with long sleeves despite the warm weather and nervous energy that suggested he was always looking for his next adrenaline fix. "What's the situation?" Langley asked, his hand already moving to his baton. "Got ourselves a real federal agent here," Strickland said mockingly. "Says he's FBI, investigating us poor, honest cops. Probably watched too many movies while he was high." Xavier watched both officers carefully, memorizing every detail. Strickland's badge number 4721 gleamed on his chest, while Langley wore 5839. Xavier had been documenting their activities for weeks, watching them shake down local businesses, plant evidence, and abuse their authority with impunity. Now he was experiencing their corruption firsthand. "Officers, I'm going to slowly reach for my identification," Xavier said, his voice carrying the calm authority of 15 years in federal law enforcement. "My FBI credentials are in my jacket pocket." "Don't you move," Strickland barked, his hand moving to his weapon. "Now you're reaching for what? A gun?" "I am unarmed," Xavier replied firmly. "I am a federal agent conducting an authorized investigation. You need to contact FBI Director Philip Grayson immediately at 202-324-3000. Strickland's eyes narrowed. This homeless man spoke with too much confidence, knew too many specific details. It was unsettling, but Strickland had come too far to back down now. 3 weeks ago, he'd taken $50,000 from drug dealer Marcus Torres in exchange for losing key evidence. If Internal Affairs was really investigating, if this man had somehow recorded that transaction, Strickland was looking at 20 years in federal prison. "You know what I think?" Strickland stepped closer, his shadow falling across Xavier. "I think you're delusional. Probably been smoking that synthetic stuff that's going around. Makes people think they're cops, FBI agents, superheroes even." Across the street, Agent Monica Briggs sat at a window table in Bruno's coffee shop, her red blouse and professional demeanor allowing her to blend in with the downtown business crowd. She watched the confrontation through high-powered binoculars, her hand hovering over her service weapon. Every instinct screamed at her to intervene, to flash her badge and extract her partner immediately. But Xavier had been clear. The investigation was bigger than one arrest, bigger than one corrupt cop. They needed to document the entire system, capture the full extent of the corruption that poisoned the 12th precinct. "This is a mistake that will cost you your career," Xavier said, his voice carrying no threat, only certainty. "Detective Strickland, badge 4721. You are about to commit multiple federal crimes, including assault on a federal officer, civil rights violations, and obstruction of justice." Something about the way Xavier spoke made Langley hesitate. "Strickland, maybe we should call this in. Guy knows an awful lot about federal procedures." "He's crazy," Langley. "Probably spent time in county and heard other inmates talking about their cases." Strickland grabbed Xavier's arm and yanked him to his feet. "Get up, Agent whatever your name is. Special Agent Xavier Booth, FB 7439. Xavier repeated as Strickland spun him around and slammed him face first against the brick wall. The impact sent shockwaves through Xavier's chest, but he remained calm, knowing that every assault was being captured by Monica's surveillance equipment. "I've had enough of your mouth," Strickland growled, pressing his forearm against the back of Xavier's neck. "You want to play FBI? Let me show you how we treat cop wannabes in Metro City." Strickland drove his knee into Xavier's lower back, sending lightning bolts of pain up his spine. Xavier absorbed the blow silently, his mind automatically cataloging each use of force for his eventual federal report. Unnecessary force applied to compliant suspect. Assault with intent to cause bodily harm. Civil rights violation under color of authority. What's happening in there? A woman's voice came out loud over the growing crowd of onlookers. A few people had come out of the cafe to watch the arrest, with some already pulling their phones out to film. "Police business," Langley called out in response, but he did not sound very convincing. He was aware this was becoming an unusual arrest. The crowd was making him nervous. "That man isn't resisting," called out another voice. "Why are you beating him like that?" Strickland looked up to see at least a dozen people watching, several with phones pointed in his direction. "Langley, get those phones," he ordered, while Strickland held Xavier against the wall. Langley moved through the crowd, using his authority to confiscate recording devices. "This is an active police investigation," he announced. "Recording is interfering with official business. Hand over your phones now." The crowd reluctantly complied, knowing that resistance would likely result in their own arrests. Xavier memorized their faces, knowing he would need witnesses for the federal case. The woman in the blue jacket appeared to be in her 60s. The man in the green top was maybe 45. And the teenager with the orange shirt looked terrified but defiant. "Listen to me very carefully," Xavier said, his voice steady despite Strickland's forearm pressed against his neck. "Contact FBI Director Philip Grayson. Tell him Agent Xavier Booth is in custody and requires immediate extraction. This is a federal matter." "Shut up." Strickland slammed Xavier's face against the brick wall again, splitting his lip and sending blood streaming down his chin. "I'm tired of your federal agent fantasy." Officer Tanya Okafor showed up then, 2 blocks away on patrol. When she heard the backup call, she saw nothing standard about the arrest taking place there. The suspect remained calm and compliant while being attacked by her fellow officers. After being on the force for 8 years, Okafor recognized excessive force when she saw it. She came over and asked, "Strickland, what is going on?" Okafor's ever-present long-sleeve uniform adorned her body. She held her hand over her radio and not her gun. "Got a delusional subject claiming to be FBI," Strickland replied, not loosening his grip on Xavier. "He's been interfering with police business, destroyed evidence." Okafor studied the scene. The suspect wasn't resisting, wasn't armed, and was bleeding from facial injuries that looked severe. Has he been read his rights? And why is he bleeding? "He resisted," Langley said quickly. "Tried to run when we first approached." Xavier turned his head slightly, making eye contact with Okafor. "Officer, my name is Special Agent Xavier Booth, FBI badge FB7439. I am conducting an authorized federal investigation. Please contact Director Philip Grayson at FBI headquarters to verify my identity." Something in Xavier's voice, the specific badge number, the calm authority despite his injuries, made Okafor pause. She'd arrested plenty of delusional suspects over the years, but this man spoke with the precision of someone accustomed to testifying in federal court. "Maybe we should verify his story," she suggested carefully. "Call it in. Check if there's any federal investigation ongoing." Strickland's eyes flashed with anger. "Okafor, mind your own damn business. This is my arrest, my scene. You got a problem with how I handle suspects?" The threat in Strickland's voice was clear. Okafor knew the detective had connections throughout the department, knew that crossing him could mean the end of her career. But watching a handcuffed man being beaten didn't sit right with her oath to protect and serve. "I'm just saying proper procedure," she replied carefully. "Proper procedure is backing up your fellow officers," Strickland snapped. "Now either help us get this nutcase in the car, or get back to your patrol route." Langley had finished confiscating phones and returned to assist with the arrest. At Strickland's direction, he produced heavy-duty zip ties instead of standard handcuffs. They pulled Xavier's arms behind his back and secured his wrists so tightly that circulation was immediately cut off. "These restraints are too tight," Xavier said calmly. "This constitutes cruel and unusual punishment and violates federal standards for prisoner treatment. Look at him bringing back up federal standards again. Strickland scoffed. Where did you learn that from? School of Law. Xavier got spun around by him, holding him by his jacket. You believe that memorizing a few legal terms makes you a federal agent? Detective Strickland, Xavier said, looking straight into the corrupt cop's eyes, you just committed assault on a federal officer and civil rights violations under USC Title 18 Sections 241 and 242 and obstruction of justice. They all can land you a federal sentence of 20 years. For just a moment, doubt flickered across Strickland's face. The homeless man's knowledge was too detailed, too specific. But then his survival instincts kicked in. If this man really was FBI, if he really had been investigating the 12th precinct, then Strickland was already finished. His only chance was to discredit Xavier completely, make him look so mentally unstable that any testimony would be worthless. You know what I think? Strickland grabbed Xavier by the throat. I think you're a cop killer. I think you're planning to ambush police officers. And all this FBI nonsense is just cover story. He drove his fist into Xavier's stomach, doubling him over despite the federal agent's conditioning. Xavier absorbed the blow, his mind automatically filing away each detail for his eventual testimony. Unprovoked assault, excessive force against compliant prisoner, false accusations designed to justify further violence. That's enough, Okafor said firmly. The suspect is secured and compliant. There's no justification for continued force. Strickland whirled on her. You questioning my judgment, Okafor? You think this piece of garbage deserves special treatment? I think he deserves constitutional rights like every other suspect, she replied, knowing she was crossing a line but unable to watch the brutality continue. Constitutional rights? Strickland laughed harshly. Maybe you should transfer to internal affairs if you're so worried about constitutional rights. The threat was clear, but Okafor stood her ground. I'm worried about proper police procedure. Langley grabbed Xavier's legs while Strickland took his arms, and they carried him toward the patrol car despite his ability to walk. Xavier used the opportunity to memorize additional details about the growing crowd, the exact location, the time of day. Every fact would matter when this case went to federal court. They threw him into the back seat with enough force to bang his head against the opposite door. Xavier's vision blurred momentarily, but he remained conscious, knowing he needed to document every moment of this arrest. As the patrol car pulled away from the curb, Xavier caught a glimpse of Monica Briggs still sitting in the coffee shop window. Their eyes met for just a moment, and he gave her the slightest nod. The message was clear. Maintain surveillance, gather evidence, but don't intervene. The mission was bigger than his personal safety. The ride to the 12th precinct took 12 minutes, during which Strickland and Langley discussed how to handle their unusual prisoner. Xavier listened carefully as they debated charges: trespassing, resisting arrest, assault on an officer, interfering with police business. Each fabricated charge would add to the federal case against them. Somebody's definitely on something, Langley said. You don't stay that calm unless you're high or crazy. Well, probably both, said Strickland. Let's keep him hidden in holding until the high wears off and see if he's still playing FBI. From the car, Xavier was dragged and led in through the back when they got to the precinct. The 12th precinct building was standard fare for inner-city cops: fluorescent lighting, institutional green walls, hospital-grade disinfectant, and the coffee smell of stress. Captain Ronald Hester was waiting in the booking area. He was a large man in his 50s. His blue captain's jacket stretched tight over a substantial gut. Xavier recognized him from weeks of surveillance, knew him as the corrupt commander who had turned the entire precinct into his personal criminal enterprise. What do we have here? Hester asked, looking Xavier up and down with obvious contempt. Crazy homeless guy, claiming to be FBI, Strickland explained. Says he's been investigating us for corruption. Had some kind of recording device he destroyed when we tried to confiscate it. Hester's eyes narrowed. FBI, huh? Let me guess. He's also CIA, Secret Service, and probably a Navy SEAL too. Actually claimed to have a badge number and everything, Langley added. FB 7439, new Director Grayson's name, all kinds of specific details. Probably looked it up online, Hester said dismissively. Internet's full of that information these days. But Xavier could see the concern in the captain's eyes, the recognition that something about this arrest wasn't routine. Captain Hester, Xavier said formally. I am Special Agent Xavier Booth, FBI badge FB 7439, currently assigned to the Public Corruption Unit. I am authorized to conduct a federal investigation into criminal activity within this precinct. I require you to get in touch with Director Philip Grayson this very moment to confirm my credentials, he said. Hester stared at Xavier for a long moment, observing the federal agent's calm demeanor, measured speech, and steady gaze. Then he smiled coldly. Do you know what I think, boy? Hester moved in closer. I think you're just a cocky nigger who thinks he's better than he is, he said in a lower voice filled with racial hate. Do you really think that you can waltz into my precinct, insult my cops, and slink away behind some federal agent fantasy? The racial slur hit like a physical blow, but Xavier absorbed it, along with all the other evidence he was gathering. Civil rights violation, hate crime enhancement, federal discrimination charges. I think, Hester continued, you need to learn some respect for law enforcement. And I think a night in our special holding cell might teach you some manners. Xavier was processed through booking with deliberate roughness. His fingerprints were taken with excessive force. His photos snapped while officers made racist jokes. His personal effects confiscated and accidentally scattered across the floor. Through it all, he maintained his calm professionalism, knowing that each abuse was adding years to their eventual federal sentences. The holding cell was in the basement, a concrete box with a metal bench and a toilet that hadn't been cleaned in months. As the heavy door clanged shut, Xavier could hear Strickland, Langley, and Hester celebrating in the hallway outside. Think he'll still be playing FBI agent tomorrow morning? Langley asked. Doubt it, Strickland replied. Nothing like a night in Metro City lockup to adjust someone's attitude. Should have seen his face when I called him boy, Hester added. All that federal agent bullshit disappeared real quick. They were wrong. As Xavier sat on the metal bench, blood dried on his face and zip tie marks still visible on his wrists, his resolve had never been stronger. Each assault, each racial slur, each constitutional violation had been carefully documented in his memory. When this case reached federal court, these corrupt officers would face the full weight of federal justice. He closed his eyes and began organizing his evidence, preparing for the testimony that would destroy their careers and reform an entire police department. The mission was entering its most dangerous phase, but Xavier Booth had never failed to complete an investigation. Outside his cell, the corrupt officers continued their celebration, completely unaware that they had just assaulted one of the FBI's most decorated agents. The holding cell reeked of disinfectant and desperation, but Xavier Booth had endured worse conditions during his 15-year FBI career. Sitting on the metal bench in his torn orange jacket and blue jeans, he maintained perfect posture despite the pain radiating from his ribs where Officer Curtis Langley had kicked him. The overhead fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the concrete walls, but Xavier welcomed the brightness. It kept him alert, focused on his mission. 18 hours had passed since Detective Gavin Strickland's brutal arrest. 18 hours of documenting every federal law violation, every constitutional breach, every piece of evidence that would eventually destroy the corrupt network infecting Metro City's 12th precinct. Xavier's trained mind cataloged each detail with photographic precision. The steel door clanged open, and Captain Ronald Hester strutted in, wearing his long-sleeved uniform, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The heavy-set captain's face wore the smug expression of a man who believed himself untouchable. Behind him trailed a younger officer, carrying a manila folder thick with fabricated paperwork. Well, Special Agent Xavier Booth, Hester drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. Ready to drop this FBI fantasy and face reality? Xavier met his gaze steadily. I've told you repeatedly, Captain. I'm FBI Agent Xavier Booth. Badge number FB7439. Currently assigned to the Public Corruption Unit. I demand my phone call and immediate contact with my superior, Director Philip Grayson. Hester laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the concrete walls. The only thing you're getting is a reality check. Trespassing, resisting arrest, assault on a police officer. That's 20 years minimum in state prison. The charges were completely fabricated, each one a federal crime in itself. Xavier had never trespassed, never resisted, and certainly never assaulted anyone. But he knew Hester's game. The captain was betting that a homeless black man's word would never stand against 3 white police officers in court. You're manufacturing evidence, Xavier said calmly. That's a federal felony under Section 242 of Title 18. Conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law. Hester's confident expression flickered slightly. You talk big for a street bum. What'd you do, study law in the library? I graduated from Quantico, in the top 5% of my class, Xavier replied. 15 years federal law enforcement experience. Specialized training in organized crime, public corruption, and civil rights violations. My current assignment involves investigating systematic corruption in this precinct, which you've just added to exponentially. The captain's face flushed red, but he forced another laugh. Internet research doesn't make you FBI, boy. Xavier rattled off a series of internal FBI codes, current case numbers from ongoing federal investigations, and specific procedural protocols that no civilian could possibly know. He described the layout of FBI headquarters, named specific agents in various field offices, and detailed classified federal law enforcement techniques. Hester's confidence wavered further, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. Lucky guesses. Maybe you worked as a janitor in some federal building. Then explain how I know that Operation Blue Shield was compromised last month by a leak in your department, Xavier said quietly. Or why the DEA pulled their joint task force operation after someone tipped off the Martinez cartel about Thursday's raid. The color drained from Hester's face. Those details were highly classified, known only to a handful of federal agents and corrupt local cops who'd been feeding information to criminals. Xavier's knowledge could only come from one source, legitimate FBI access. But Hester had gone too far to retreat now. Lock him up, he barked to the younger officer. 24-hour psychiatric hold. This man is clearly delusional and dangerous. As the captain stormed out, Xavier added another federal crime to his mental list: unlawful detention of a federal agent. The evidence was mounting exponentially. Hours crawled by in the holding cell. Through the small window, Xavier could see Agent Monica Briggs positioned in the coffee shop across the street, her red blouse visible through the glass. She'd been maintaining surveillance for 18 hours, coordinating with Director Philip Grayson and preparing for extraction. But Xavier had signaled her through subtle hand gestures to maintain position. This operation was too important to abort now. The cell door opened again, and Detective Gavin Strickland entered wearing his short-sleeved uniform, his face grim with determination. He carried a digital recorder and a thick folder, setting up for interrogation. Time for some truth, Marcus, Strickland said, using Xavier's undercover alias. Drop the act. We both know you're not FBI. Agent Xavier Booth, he corrected patiently. I can provide my service record, commendations, case history, and direct contact information for my supervisors. Strickland settled into his chair, studying Xavier intently. Okay, let's play. Tell me about FBI procedure for undercover operations. Xavier launched into a detailed explanation of federal protocols, approval procedures, chain of command requirements, backup agent positioning, evidence preservation standards, and legal boundaries for undercover work. He described specific training scenarios from Quantico, named instructors who'd taught specialized courses, and outlined federal regulations governing law enforcement infiltration operations. The detective's expression grew increasingly uncomfortable as Xavier demonstrated knowledge that no civilian could possess. But Strickland's racist assumptions ran too deep to accept reality. Google searches, he muttered. You studied up good. I'll give you that. Then explain my knowledge of the Torino family investigation, Xavier said. Specifically, why Agent Patricia Valdez was reassigned after the Miami operation went sideways 3 months ago. Strickland's eyes widened. That information was so classified that even local law enforcement brass wouldn't have access. Only active federal agents working organized crime cases would know those details. But the detective's pride overruled his growing doubts. Lucky guess. Maybe you got a cousin work somewhere federal. Xavier shook his head sadly. Every moment of denial was another federal crime, another piece of evidence for the eventual prosecution. Strickland was digging his own grave deeper with each word. Down the hallway, Xavier could hear other illegal activities unfolding. Officer Curtis Langley was destroying evidence from a drug bust, bragging loudly about planting cocaine on an innocent teenager. 2 detectives discussed dividing money stolen from a crime scene, arguing over proper percentages. Captain Hester intimidated a witness over the phone, threatening her family if she testified in an upcoming brutality case. Each conversation was another federal crime. Each word was more evidence for the massive racketeering case Xavier was building. The 12th Precinct wasn't just corrupt, it was a criminal organization operating under color of law. Other inmates in nearby cells began sharing their stories when they learned Xavier was investigating police corruption. Marcus Williams, a mechanic, described being framed for auto theft when he couldn't pay Detective Langley's protection money. Sarah Chen, a restaurant owner, told how Captain Hester demanded weekly payments to avoid health department harassment. James Foster, a college student, had been beaten unconscious during a traffic stop for disrespecting Officer Bradley. Xavier memorized every detail, every name, every crime. These weren't isolated incidents. They were systematic violations of civil rights, part of an organized pattern that stretched back years. The corruption was far worse than FBI intelligence had suggested. Meanwhile, Officer Tanya Okafor was struggling with her conscience in the precinct's main office. She'd witnessed Xavier's brutal arrest, heard his consistent claims about being FBI, and noticed details that troubled her professional instincts. His vocabulary, his calm demeanor under pressure, his extensive knowledge of law enforcement procedures, none of it fit the profile of a delusional homeless man. Wearing her short-sleeved uniform and sitting at her desk under the bright overhead lights, Tanya pulled out her personal cell phone. She'd found the FBI's public corruption hotline online and was debating whether to call. If Xavier was really FBI, she could be saving a federal agent's life. If he was lying, she'd waste 5 minutes on a dead-end call. Her conscience won. She dialed the number and waited through several rings before reaching a voicemail system. You've reached the FBI Public Corruption Hotline. If this is an emergency involving a federal agent, press 1. Otherwise, leave a detailed message and we'll respond within 24 hours. Tanya hesitated, then pressed 1. The line rang twice before a crisp voice answered. Agent Morrison, emergency response. This is Officer Tanya Okafor, Metro City Police, 12th Precinct. We have a man in custody claiming to be FBI agent Xavier Booth, badge number FB7439. He was arrested yesterday and has been requesting contact with Director Philip Grayson. The silence stretched so long that Tanya wondered if the call had dropped. Then Agent Morrison's voice returned, sharp with urgency. Officer Okafor, this is now a federal matter. Do not discuss this call with anyone in your department. Agent Xavier Booth is currently assigned to a classified operation. Is he injured? Tanya's heart raced. Xavier really was FBI. Yes, sir. He was beaten during arrest. He's been denied medical attention and his phone call. We're initiating immediate response protocols. Officer Okafor, Agent Xavier Booth's safety is now your responsibility until federal agents arrive. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. We'll remember your cooperation. As evening approached, a thin woman in a rumpled red suit arrived at the precinct. Public Defender Rebecca Martinez had been assigned Xavier's case and was immediately suspicious of the charges. 20 years of experience had taught her to recognize fabricated evidence, and Xavier's case reeked of police misconduct. She found Captain Hester blocking access to her client, claiming Xavier was undergoing psychiatric evaluation. But Rebecca knew the law better than most cops, and she wasn't easily intimidated. Captain, I'm appointed counsel for Marcus Johnson, also known as Xavier Booth. I demand immediate access. He's dangerous, Hester lied. Attacked 3 officers. We're evaluating his mental state. Rebecca studied the paperwork, noting inconsistencies and impossibilities. The timestamps didn't match witness statements. The charges contradicted each other. Most tellingly, the officers' reports described completely different versions of the same incident. This is manufactured, she said flatly. I'm filing federal civil rights complaints first thing Monday morning. Hester's face darkened, but he couldn't legally block her access much longer. The fabricated evidence would never survive competent legal scrutiny, and he knew it. As night fell, Xavier was transferred to county jail in preparation for his first court appearance. The move would finally give him access to phones and outside contact. As the transport van pulled away from the 12th precinct, Xavier caught a glimpse of Agent Monica Briggs following at a discreet distance. 18 hours of illegal detention, brutal assault, fabricated charges, and systematic civil rights violations. But also 18 hours of gathering evidence that would destroy the entire corrupt network. Soon he'd make contact with Director Philip Grayson. Soon the full weight of federal law enforcement would descend on Metro City's 12th precinct. Soon, Detective Gavin Strickland and his corrupt colleagues would learn that they'd made the worst mistake of their careers when they decided to brutalize an FBI agent. The fluorescent lights of Metro County Jail cast harsh shadows across the concrete walls as Xavier Booth sat on the metal bench in his holding cell. After 18 hours of deliberate abuse and constitutional violations, he finally had access to what every prisoner was guaranteed: one phone call. The irony wasn't lost on him that it took being transferred from the corrupt 12th precinct to county lockup to exercise his basic rights. Xavier approached the payphone mounted on the wall, his movements deliberate despite the soreness from Detective Gavin Strickland's assault. His green shirt was torn and stained, his blue jacket confiscated during booking, but his mind remained sharp as a blade. Every detail of the last day and a half had been catalogued, every violation documented in his memory for the federal case that would follow. He dialed a number he knew by heart, one that would set everything in motion. Director Grayson, came the familiar voice after 2 rings. Sir, this is Xavier Booth, badge FB7439. I need immediate extraction. The silence stretched for 3 seconds before Director Philip Grayson's voice returned, tight with controlled fury. Jesus Christ, Xavier. We've been monitoring radio traffic. Are you injured? Bruised ribs, facial contusions, possible concussion, nothing that won't heal. Sir, we have them dead to rights. Civil rights violations, assault on a federal officer, conspiracy, evidence tampering, the works. Detective Gavin Strickland and his entire unit walked into every trap we set. Xavier could hear keyboards clicking in the background as Director Grayson mobilized resources. "I'm dispatching a federal extraction team now. Agent Briggs has been coordinating from her position. She documented everything from the outside while you gathered internal evidence. The scope goes higher than we thought," Yazier continued, keeping his voice low. "Captain Ronald Hester is running the corruption ring. They're planning to falsify psychiatric evaluations to discredit my testimony. I need those warrants fast." "Already on it. I'm calling Attorney General Morrison now. Federal marshals will have paper within the hour." Xavier smiled, despite his split lip. After 15 years with the Bureau, he knew Director Grayson's reputation for swift action. "Sir, they have no idea what's coming. Strickland thinks he arrested a mentally ill homeless man. They're celebrating right now." "Let them celebrate. It'll make their fall that much harder." Meanwhile, 3 miles away at McGillicuddy's bar, Detective Gavin Strickland raised his beer bottle in a toast. The dim lighting from yesterday had given way to the bright afternoon sun streaming through the windows, illuminating his short-sleeved police uniform as he basked in what he believed was victory. "To putting another crazy vagrant where he belongs," Strickland announced to Officer Curtis Langley and Captain Ronald Hester. "By tomorrow, that nut job will be in Riverside Psychiatric, getting the help he clearly needs." Officer Langley, still in his long-sleeved uniform, shifted uncomfortably on his bar stool. "Gavin, I gotta say, something bothered me about that guy. He knew too much about federal procedures, details that you can't just Google." Strickland waved dismissively. "Curtis, you worry too much. These street people watch cop shows all day. They pick up terminology. Hell, half the criminals I arrest think they're lawyers because they memorized some Miranda rights." Captain Hester, his blue jacket draped over the chair back revealing his orange polo shirt, nodded approvingly. "Strickland's right. The psychological evaluation will show he's delusional. Classic case of someone who watches too much TV and starts believing his own fantasies." "But the way he handled the interrogation," Langley pressed, "he never broke character, never got angry. Most people would have cracked by now, admitted they were lying." "That's what makes him dangerous," Strickland replied, taking another swig. "He's convinced himself his delusion is real. That's why we need him off the streets permanently." Back at county jail, Xavier had finished his call and returned to his cell. Within minutes, he could hear the distant rumble of vehicles approaching. Through the small window, he glimpsed black SUVs forming a convoy in the parking lot. Agent Monica Briggs stepped out of the lead vehicle, her red blazer unmistakable even from this distance. She was flanked by 6 federal agents, all wearing tactical gear and grim expressions. Xavier felt a surge of relief wash over him. The cavalry had arrived. At the front desk, Agent Briggs approached the duty sergeant with federal credentials in hand. "I'm Agent Monica Briggs, FBI. I need to speak with your watch commander immediately." Sergeant Rodriguez, a honest cop who'd transferred from the corrupt 12th Precinct to escape the toxic culture, recognized the authority in her voice. "Ma'am, that would be Lieutenant Foster. He's in his office." Within minutes, Lieutenant Foster emerged, studying the federal warrant Agent Briggs presented. His eyes widened as he read the details. "You're here for the homeless man Strickland brought in? Marcus Johnson? That man is Special Agent Xavier Booth, Federal Bureau of Investigation. He's been conducting an authorized undercover operation targeting police corruption. Detective Strickland and his unit assaulted a federal agent." Lieutenant Foster's face went pale. He'd heard rumors about Strickland's methods, but had dismissed them as jealous gossip. "I'll have him brought up immediately." Meanwhile, back at McGillicuddy's bar, Strickland's phone buzzed with an urgent text from a dispatcher he'd bribed for inside information. "FBI at county jail asking about your vagrant arrest. Multiple agents." The beer bottle slipped from Strickland's suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor. Officer Langley noticed his partner's expression change from confident smugness to dawning horror. "What's wrong?" Langley asked. Strickland's voice came out as a croak. FBI. They're at the jail asking about Marcus Johnson. Captain Hester scoffed. So what? Probably following up on some missing person report. His family filed a complaint, but Strickland was already running scenarios in his head, each one worse than the last. What if the vagrant hadn't been lying? What if he really was FBI? At county jail, the steel door of Xavier's cell clanged open. Lieutenant Foster stood there with obvious respect, holding an FBI windbreaker in his hands. Agent Booth, on behalf of Metro County Sheriff's Department, I apologize for this situation. These gentlemen are here to escort you out. Xavier slipped on the windbreaker, instantly transforming from bedraggled prisoner to federal law enforcement officer. The change in his demeanor was striking. Gone was the submissive homeless man who'd endured Strickland's abuse. In his place stood a decorated FBI agent with 15 years of experience and the full weight of federal authority behind him. Agent Briggs approached, professional relief evident in her eyes. Sir, medical is standing by. Director Grayson wants a full debrief within the hour. I'm fine, Monica, but we need to move fast. They're planning to have me declared mentally incompetent to discredit my testimony. Every minute we delay gives them time to destroy evidence. As the FBI convoy prepared to leave, Xavier turned to Lieutenant Foster. I need you to contact Officer Tanya Okafor at the 12th Precinct. She's clean. She tried to intervene during my arrest. She'll need federal protection when this breaks. Already handled, Agent Briggs replied. She's been in protective custody since yesterday. Her testimony corroborates everything you documented. The convoy rolled through downtown Metro City. Federal vehicles with their distinctive government plates drawing curious stares from pedestrians. Word was already spreading through police radio channels that something big was happening. At McGillicuddy's bar, Strickland's phone rang. The caller ID showed Captain Ronald Hester's direct line. Strickland, get down here now. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that ends careers. That vagrant you arrested? FBI just extracted him from county jail with federal warrants. The phone slipped from Strickland's hand, clattering across the bar floor. Officer Langley watched his partner's face cycle through disbelief, terror, and finally, sick recognition of the truth. Oh God, Strickland whispered. He really was FBI. What are you talking about? Langley demanded. Marcus Johnson. He kept saying he was Special Agent Xavier Booth. Badge number FB7439. I thought he was crazy. Langley felt his own stomach drop as the implications hit him. Gavin, what did we do? We assaulted a federal agent. We violated his civil rights. We held him without charges. Strickland's voice grew quieter with each realization. We're going to prison. By now, the FBI convoy had arrived at the federal building downtown. Xavier stepped out of the lead SUV, his professional bearing fully restored despite the visible injuries on his face. News crews, somehow alerted to the developing story, captured footage of the decorated FBI agent who'd endured police brutality to expose corruption. Director Philip Grayson waited in the lobby, his expression mixing pride and anger. Pride in Xavier's dedication to the mission, anger at what had been done to one of his best agents. Xavier, excellent work. The Attorney General has authorized a full federal prosecution. We have warrants being prepared for Strickland, Langley, Hester, and 6 others in their corruption network. What about the mayor? Lorraine Connolly will be indicted separately. Your evidence about campaign contributions in exchange for protection extends the conspiracy to City Hall. As they rode the elevator to the FBI field office, Agent Briggs filled Xavier in on developments. Simultaneous raids are planned for tonight. We'll hit their homes, the precinct, and City Hall all at once. No time to coordinate their stories or destroy evidence. Xavier nodded approvingly. After 18 hours of enduring Strickland's abuse while gathering evidence, He was ready to see justice served. Meanwhile, at the 12th Precinct, Detective Gavin Strickland sat in Captain Hester's office. Both men, realizing their careers and freedom were measured in hours, not years. The same fluorescent lights that had illuminated their crimes now seemed harsh and unforgiving as reality crashed down around them. "How the hell were we supposed to know?" Hester demanded. "He looked homeless. He acted homeless. He told us exactly who he was," Strickland replied quietly. "Multiple times. We just didn't listen." Outside the precinct, federal agents were already positioning surveillance teams for the evening raids. Special Agent Xavier Booth's undercover operation was about to bear fruit in the most spectacular takedown of police corruption in Metro City's history. The revelation was complete. Now came the reckoning. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the federal building's secure conference room as Agent Xavier Booth adjusted his crisp navy blue suit jacket and straightened his emerald green tie. The fluorescent lights overhead cast everything in sharp relief, illuminating the mountain of evidence spread across the polished mahogany table. Xavier had traded his undercover homeless disguise for his professional FBI attire, and the transformation was striking. U.S. Attorney Patricia Hayes entered the room wearing a sharp red blazer and matching red slacks, her heels clicking authoritatively on the marble floor. FBI Director Philip Grayson followed close behind, his commanding presence filling the space as he wore his standard dark blue suit with white dress shirt. Agent Monica Briggs sat at Xavier's right side, wearing her orange blouse and navy blue jacket, her laptop open and recording equipment ready. "Agent Booth," Director Grayson began, settling into his chair. "I want you to walk us through everything, every detail, every violation, every piece of evidence you collected during your 3 weeks undercover." Xavier nodded, his professional demeanor fully restored after the brutal treatment he'd endured. He opened the first evidence folder, revealing dozens of photographs taken with his hidden camera devices. "Director, Attorney Hayes, what you're about to see represents the most systematic corruption I've encountered in my 15 years with the Bureau." Patricia Hayes leaned forward, her red blazer catching the light. "Agent Booth, before we begin, I want to acknowledge your courage. What you endured to gather this evidence goes above and beyond." "Thank you, ma'am. But this is about justice for the community Detective Strickland and his crew have been terrorizing." Xavier spread out a series of photographs showing Detective Gavin Strickland in his short-sleeved police uniform, accepting thick envelopes from known drug dealers. This first set shows Strickland taking $50,000 in protection money from the Martinez cartel on 3 separate occasions. Director Grayson examined the photos closely. "The image quality is remarkable. These will hold up in federal court," Xavier continued, his voice steady and professional. Agent Briggs was positioned across the street during each transaction, providing independent visual confirmation. He gestured to Monica, who pulled up video footage on her laptop screen. "I have continuous surveillance video showing Detective Strickland's entire meeting with Cartel Lieutenant Diego Santos," Monica explained, her orange blouse complementing her confident presentation. "The audio is crystal clear thanks to Xavier's wire recording the entire conversation." Attorney Hayes studied the evidence with growing satisfaction. This was the kind of rock-solid case that would send shockwaves through corrupt law enforcement nationwide. Xavier's methodical approach was building an impenetrable prosecution. Xavier opened another folder, revealing disturbing photographs of Officer Curtis Langley in his long-sleeved patrol uniform planting evidence during traffic stops. Officer Langley systematically targeted young black men, planting cocaine and marijuana to inflate arrest numbers and justify departmental funding increases. "How many victims?" Patricia asked, her expression growing grim. 17 confirmed cases over the past 6 months alone," Xavier replied. "I documented each incident, including license plate numbers, witness statements, and photographic evidence of Langley retrieving drugs from his patrol car's hidden compartment." Director Grayson shook his head in disgust. The scope of constitutional violations was staggering. Xavier had exposed a criminal enterprise masquerading as law enforcement. Monica clicked to the next video file. This footage shows the assault on Agent Booth in its entirety. Detective Strickland's brutality, Officer Langley's participation, and the clear civil rights violations are all captured in high definition. The room fell silent as they watched Xavier, still in his homeless disguise, being brutally beaten by the two officers. Seeing their decorated agent endure such treatment while maintaining his cover sparked anger and admiration in equal measure. Xavier touched his still healing facial bruises, visible reminders of Strickland's assault. The medical examination documented fractured ribs, concussion, and numerous contusions. Dr. Sarah Mitchell at Metro General Hospital photographed every injury for federal assault charges. Patricia Hayes made detailed notes, her anticipation building as the case grew stronger. Each piece of evidence Xavier presented was another nail in the corruption ring's coffin. Captain Ronald Hester orchestrated the cover-up from the precinct level. Xavier continued, opening a thick folder filled with audio transcripts. I recorded him ordering evidence destruction, witness intimidation, and fabricating arrest reports to justify excessive force. Director Grayson studied the transcripts with mounting excitement. Agent Booth, this evidence could dismantle their entire operation. Xavier nodded, then revealed his most explosive discovery. The corruption extends far beyond the precinct. Mayor Lorraine Connolly received substantial campaign contributions from Detective Strickland's operation in exchange for political protection. The room erupted with the significance of this revelation. A sitting mayor involved in police corruption conspiracy elevated this to a federal racketeering case. Monica pulled up financial records on her screen. We traced $200,000 in campaign contributions from shell companies directly linked to Strickland's money laundering operation. Mayor Connolly personally met with Captain Hester to discuss protecting his officers from internal investigations. Patricia Hayes felt her pulse quicken. This case would make national headlines and send a message to corrupt officials everywhere that federal justice was inevitable. Xavier opened another evidence folder, this one containing witness statements and photographs. Detective Simone Decker from Internal Affairs approached me yesterday with disturbing information. Her investigation into citizen complaints against Strickland's unit was systematically sabotaged by Captain Hester. How? Director Grayson asked. Hester received advance notice of every Internal Affairs inquiry, allowing him to coach his officers, destroy evidence, and intimidate witnesses before Detective Decker could interview them, Xavier explained. She documented 17 separate instances of obstruction. The pattern of corruption was so extensive, it represented a criminal conspiracy that had operated for years. Xavier's undercover operation had finally exposed the full scope of their criminal enterprise. Monica handed Director Grayson a comprehensive evidence summary. We have photographic evidence, audio recordings, video surveillance, witness testimony, medical documentation, and financial records proving systematic civil rights violations, corruption, assault on a federal officer, racketeering, and conspiracy charges. Xavier looked directly at Patricia Hayes. Attorney Hayes, this evidence proves Detective Strickland, Officer Langley, Captain Hester, and Mayor Connolly operated a criminal enterprise that violated the constitutional rights of hundreds of citizens while enriching themselves through drug money and campaign contributions. Patricia Hayes felt the satisfaction of having an airtight federal case. Xavier's professionalism and attention to detail had built something that would transform law enforcement accountability. Agent Booth, this evidence package is extraordinary. Federal Judge Edmund Wharton will have everything he needs to issue arrest warrants for the entire corruption ring, she declared. Director Grayson stood up, his anticipation for justice evident. I'm calling Judge Wharton immediately. These warrants will be signed within the hour. Xavier gathered his evidence folders, his sense of vindication growing stronger. After enduring brutal assault and systematic humiliation, federal justice was finally mobilizing against Strickland's criminal operation. Monica coordinated with the tactical team leaders via encrypted communication. Agent Booth were planning simultaneous pre-dawn raids on all subjects' homes and offices. Detective Okafor is standing by to secure the precinct evidence room and prevent destruction of additional evidence. Patricia Hayes reviewed the arrest warrant applications one final time. Agent Booth, when Detective Strickland is arrested at his suburban home tomorrow morning, he'll face the same humiliation and powerlessness he inflicted on you and countless innocent citizens. Xavier felt the poetic justice of Strickland's impending arrest, mirroring his own brutal treatment. The corrupt detective who had dismissed him as a delusional homeless man would soon discover the consequences of assaulting a federal agent. Director Grayson shook Xavier's hand firmly. Agent Booth, your courage and professionalism have exposed corruption that might have continued for years. This evidence will ensure federal convictions and systematic reform. As the meeting concluded, Xavier looked out the conference room windows at the city where Detective Strickland was spending his last night of freedom. Tomorrow's raids would begin the reckoning that corrupt officers throughout the nation would remember for decades. The evidence was overwhelming. The warrants were imminent, and federal justice was finally coming for Detective Gavin Strickland and his criminal enterprise. The federal courthouse steps buzzed with anticipation as media vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the cloudy morning sky. Natural light streamed through the tall windows of the imposing brick building, casting long shadows across the marble floors inside. Agent Xavier Booth adjusted his green button-down shirt and blue jacket as he walked through the main entrance, his FBI credentials displayed prominently on his chest. The weight of justice finally arriving felt almost surreal after weeks of enduring brutal treatment at the hands of corrupt officers. Inside courtroom 4B, Detective Gavin Strickland sat slumped at the defendant's table, his usual arrogant demeanor replaced by hollow-eyed resignation. His Orange County Jail jumpsuit was a stark contrast to the crisp police uniform he once wore with twisted pride. Officer Curtis Langley fidgeted nervously beside him, sweat beading on his forehead despite the courthouse's air conditioning. Captain Ronald Hester, the alleged ringleader, maintained a defiant scowl, but Xavier could see the fear lurking behind his bloodshot eyes. The bailiff's voice echoed through the packed courtroom as he announced the arrival of federal judge Edmund Wharton, whose reputation for harsh sentences in corruption cases preceded him. The gallery was filled with community members, fellow FBI agents, and media representatives, all waiting to witness the formal charging of the corrupt officers who had terrorized Metro City's most vulnerable citizens for years. The United States of America versus Detective Gavin Strickland, Officer Curtis Langley, and Captain Ronald Hester, Judge Wharton announced, his voice carrying the weight of federal authority. You are charged with conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law, assault on a federal officer, racketeering, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and multiple counts of corruption. Xavier felt a surge of satisfaction as he watched Strickland's face drain of color. The same man who had slammed him against a brick wall while calling him racial slurs now trembled before the full power of the federal justice system. Each charge carried potential decades in prison, and the evidence Xavier had gathered would ensure every single count stuck. The prosecution's case began with Xavier's own testimony before the federal grand jury, delivered with the precision and professionalism that had made him one of the FBI's most respected agents. Standing at the witness podium in his blue jacket and green shirt, Xavier recounted every detail of his 3-week undercover operation with methodical clarity. During my time posing as Marcus Johnson, I documented systematic corruption that went far beyond individual bad actors, Xavier testified, his voice steady and authoritative. This was an organized criminal enterprise operating under the protection of police badges. I witnessed Detective Strickland accept $50,000 in drug money from known dealers, I saw Captain Hester order the destruction of evidence that would have exonerated innocent suspects. I experienced firsthand their pattern of racially motivated violence against citizens who had committed no crimes. Strickland's defense attorney, a nervous man in an ill-fitting suit, attempted to argue entrapment, claiming that Xavier's presence had somehow corrupted his client. The argument crumbled immediately under cross-examination when Xavier calmly presented evidence showing the corruption network had been operating for years before his arrival. Agent Booth: did you at any point encourage or suggest that Detective Strickland accept bribes? The prosecutor asked. Absolutely not, Xavier replied firmly. My role was purely observational. I witnessed crimes that were already occurring as part of their standard operating procedures. They brutally assaulted me because they believed I was a homeless black man who couldn't fight back, not because I influenced them in any way. The courtroom erupted in murmurs of disgust as body camera footage played on the large screens, showing Xavier being slammed against walls and kicked while identifying himself as an FBI agent. The brutal reality of police corruption played out in high definition, leaving no room for denial or excuse. Outside the courthouse, the community's response was swift and overwhelming. Reverend Michael Washington, a respected civil rights leader, wearing a red dress shirt and black jacket, led a crowd of over 200 protesters demanding complete reform of the 12th Precinct. For too long, our community has suffered under the boot of corrupt officers who believed their badges made them untouchable, Washington declared from the courthouse steps, his voice carrying across the crowd. Agent Xavier Booth risked everything to expose the truth, and now we demand justice not just for him, but for every innocent person these criminals brutalized. The crowd cheered as Washington held up photos of Xavier during his undercover operation, beaten and bloodied, but maintaining his dignity even in the face of systematic abuse. Community members shared their own stories of harassment, planted evidence, and violence at the hands of Strickland's unit, each testimony adding weight to the federal charges. Inside City Hall, Mayor Lorraine Connolly scrambled for damage control from behind her polished desk, her red blazer and matching skirt projecting authority she no longer possessed. Her carefully prepared statement blamed the corruption on a few bad apples while defending her administration's oversight. The performance fell flat as federal investigators revealed bank records showing suspicious campaign contributions from known drug dealers with connections to the corrupt officers. Mayor Connolly received over $300,000 in campaign contributions that can be directly traced to criminal organizations protected by Detective Strickland's unit, FBI Director Philip Grayson announced at his own press conference. We are expanding our investigation to include potential conspiracy charges against any elected officials who enabled this criminal enterprise. Back at the courthouse, Officer Tanya Okafor stood proudly beside FBI officials as she received a formal commendation for her attempts to prevent Xavier's assault and her cooperation with the federal investigation. Wearing her dress blues with short sleeves, her bearing reflected the integrity that true law enforcement officers should embody. Officer Okafor represents the best of what policing can be, Xavier said during the ceremony. While her colleagues chose corruption and violence, she chose to stand up for what was right, even when it put her career at risk. Her courage reminds us that most officers entered this profession to serve and protect, not to abuse and exploit. The ceremony was broadcast live, showing the stark contrast between honest officers like Okafor and the criminals who had hijacked the badge's authority. Her example gave hope to community members who had begun to believe all police were corrupt. FBI agent Monica Briggs, wearing her green FBI windbreaker, testified about the extensive surveillance operation that had captured months of criminal activity. Her testimony revealed how she had watched helplessly as her partner was brutally beaten, forced to maintain operational security even as every instinct screamed at her to intervene. Agent Booth showed incredible courage, by continuing the mission even after being assaulted, Briggs testified. He knew that exposing the full scope of corruption was more important than his personal safety. His sacrifice will protect countless innocent people from future abuse. Detective Simone Decker from Internal Affairs presented a damning picture of systematic cover-ups that had protected Strickland's unit for years. Her red blazer and professional demeanor commanded respect as she detailed how Captain Hester had buried dozens of legitimate complaints against his officers. "We found over 40 complaints of excessive force, racial profiling, and corruption filed against Detective Strickland alone," Decker testified. Captain Hester marked every single one as unfounded without conducting any meaningful investigation. This pattern of protection enabled their criminal enterprise to flourish. Public Defender Rebecca Martinez revealed the human cost of the corruption during her emotional testimony. Wearing a red dress suit, she presented case files showing how many innocent people had been framed, beaten, and imprisoned by the corrupt unit. 17 innocent people are currently serving time in state prison based on evidence planted by these officers, Martinez announced, her voice heavy with moral outrage. Dozens more pled guilty to crimes they didn't commit because they feared even worse treatment. Agent Booth's investigation will finally give these victims the justice they deserve. As the arraignment proceedings concluded, Judge Wharton addressed the bail question with stern finality. The prosecution had argued that all three defendants posed flight risks and continued dangers to public safety, given their extensive knowledge of police procedures and their history of violence against perceived enemies. These defendants used their positions of trust to terrorize the very citizens they swore to protect, Judge Wharton declared from his elevated bench. They committed federal crimes while armed and acting under color of law, representing the worst possible abuse of police authority. Given the severity of the charges, the strength of the evidence, and the clear danger they pose to witnesses and the community, bail is denied for all defendants. The gavel's bang echoed through the packed courtroom like a gunshot, sealing the fate of the three corrupt officers. Strickland's head dropped into his hands as the reality of spending months in federal custody awaited trial fully sank in. Langley began crying openly, while Hester maintained his defiant glare even as federal marshals prepared to escort them back to their cells. Xavier watched from the gallery as the same officers who had brutalized him were led away in shackles and orange jumpsuits, their weapons and badges replaced by handcuffs and shame. The sight should have felt triumphant, but instead Xavier felt a profound sadness for how far these men had fallen from their oath to serve and protect. As the courtroom emptied, Xavier stood on the federal courthouse steps in the afternoon sunlight, watching reporters file their stories about the day's proceedings. Agent Briggs joined him, her expression mixing satisfaction with exhaustion from the long investigation. "How does it feel watching them finally face justice?" she asked. Xavier considered the question carefully, looking out at the city he had helped protect through his sacrifice. "It feels like the beginning, not the end," he replied. "Taking down these three officers is just the start. Real change comes from rebuilding trust between law enforcement and the community, one honest interaction at a time." The sun broke through the clouds as Xavier spoke, casting natural light across the courthouse steps where justice had finally begun to take root. Tomorrow would bring the long process of trials, sentencing, and reform. But today had proven that no badge, no matter how corrupt, was above the law. The federal courthouse buzzed with anticipation as Judge Edmund Wharton prepared to deliver the verdicts that would close one of the most significant police corruption cases in Metro City's history. Xavier Booth sat in the gallery, his crisp navy blue suit and burgundy tie reflecting the dignity he'd maintained throughout this entire ordeal. The morning sunlight streamed through the courthouse's tall windows, casting everything in sharp, clear detail under the bright fluorescent lights overhead. Detective Gavin Strickland stood at the defendant's table, his orange prison jumpsuit a stark contrast to the police uniform he'd once worn with such arrogance. His face had grown gaunt, during the months of federal detention, the swagger completely drained from his posture. Beside him, Officer Curtis Langley fidgeted nervously in his matching orange jumpsuit, while Captain Ronald Hester stared straight ahead with the hollow expression of a man who knew his fate was sealed. Judge Wharton's voice cut through the courtroom's silence like a blade. In the matter of United States versus Gavin Strickland, Curtis Langley, and Ronald Hester, this court finds all defendants guilty on all charges. The words hit the courtroom like thunder. Several victims in the gallery gasped with relief, while others began crying tears of vindication. Xavier Booth felt a surge of satisfaction, not from revenge, but from the knowledge that justice was finally being served. Agent Monica Briggs, seated beside him in her professional red blazer and black slacks, squeezed his shoulder gently. They had worked tirelessly for this moment, and seeing it arrive felt almost surreal. Judge Wharton continued with the sentencing phase, his voice carrying the weight of federal authority. Detective Gavin Strickland, you have been found guilty of civil rights violations under color of law, assault on a federal officer, racketeering, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of their constitutional rights. The evidence presented shows a pattern of racist violence, corruption, and abuse of power that strikes at the very heart of our justice system. Strickland's lawyer had tried desperately to minimize the charges, arguing that his client was simply following department culture. But Judge Wharton's expression showed no sympathy for such excuses. This court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. The gavel's impact echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Strickland's legs buckled slightly, and 2 federal marshals moved closer to steady him. 25 years meant he would likely die behind bars, and everyone in that courtroom understood the finality of it. Officer Curtis Langley, Judge Wharton continued, your participation in this criminal enterprise, including the brutal assault on Agent Xavier Booth and the systematic violation of citizens' rights, merits 20 years in federal prison. Langley's mother sobbed from the back of the courtroom, but her son showed no emotion as the sentence was delivered. Captain Ronald Hester received the harshest punishment of all. As the ringleader of this corruption network, Captain Hester, you bear the greatest responsibility for creating and maintaining a culture of lawlessness within your command. This court sentences you to 30 years in federal prison. Hester's face remained stone cold, but Xavier Booth noticed his hands trembling as the marshals prepared to escort him away. Judge Wharton then turned his attention to Xavier Booth, asking him to approach the bench. Xavier walked forward with quiet dignity, his polished black shoes clicking against the marble floor. The judge's expression softened as he addressed the FBI agent who had risked everything to expose this corruption. Agent Xavier Booth, your courage in maintaining your undercover operation despite facing brutal assault and systematic abuse represents the highest ideals of law enforcement. Your willingness to endure personal harm to protect the constitutional rights of all citizens deserves the gratitude of this nation. The judge's words carried genuine admiration, and scattered applause broke out in the gallery. Xavier stepped to the microphone, his voice steady and professional. Your Honor, this case was never about me personally. It was about restoring faith in a system that had betrayed the very people it was sworn to protect. Every citizen, regardless of race or economic status, deserves to be treated with dignity by law enforcement. Today's sentences send a clear message that no badge provides immunity from justice. His words resonated throughout the packed courtroom. Several victims of the corrupt unit had been allowed to give impact statements, and their testimonies painted a horrific picture of systematic abuse. Maria Gonzalez, a single mother who had been falsely arrested by Strickland's unit, spoke through tears about how Xavier's investigation had finally validated her experience and cleared her criminal record. Agent Booth gave me back my life, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. For 2 years, I carried the shame of a false arrest, unable to find work because of fabricated charges. Today, I can hold my head up again, and tell my children that sometimes good people do fight for justice." Reverend Michael Washington, a prominent community leader who had advocated tirelessly for police reform, testified about the broader impact of the corruption. "Agent Booth didn't just expose individual bad actors," the elderly Reverend explained. "His blue jacket neat and pressed, despite his advanced age, he revealed a system that had lost its way, that had forgotten its obligation to serve all citizens equally." The testimonies continued for hours, each one adding another layer to the overwhelming evidence of systematic abuse that Xavier's undercover work had exposed. By the time court recessed, there wasn't a dry eye in the gallery, and even some of the hardened federal marshals seemed moved by the victims' stories. Outside the courthouse, the community had organized a celebration that felt more like a revival meeting than a victory party. Hundreds of citizens gathered in the courthouse plaza, many holding signs thanking Xavier for his sacrifice. Reverend Washington took the makeshift podium and called Xavier forward to receive a symbolic key to the city. "Agent Xavier Booth represents what law enforcement should be," Reverend Washington announced to the cheering crowd. "He puts service above safety, justice above comfort, and truth above convenience. Today, Metro City honors a true hero." The crowd erupted in sustained applause as Xavier accepted the ornate key, his humble smile reflecting genuine gratitude for the community's support. Agent Monica Briggs watched proudly from the side of the stage, her red blouse bright under the afternoon sun. Director Philip Grayson had already informed her that she was being recommended for promotion based on her crucial support during the dangerous undercover operation. Her surveillance work and coordination with federal prosecutors had been instrumental in building the airtight case that led to today's convictions. Perhaps most satisfying was the news about Officer Tanya Okafor's promotion to detective. Her integrity during the original incident, when she had questioned Strickland's excessive force, and her cooperation with the federal investigation had marked her as exactly the kind of officer Metro City needed moving forward. She stood near the courthouse steps in her crisp new detective's blazer, representing hope for a reformed department. The changes extended far beyond individual promotions. Mayor Lorraine Connolly faced her own federal corruption trial next month, charged with accepting bribes and obstructing justice to protect the corrupt officers. A federal monitor had been assigned to oversee comprehensive reforms in the Metro City Police Department, ensuring that the systematic problems Xavier had exposed would never resurface. Most importantly, a new police chief had been appointed with a specific mandate to rebuild community trust. Chief Patricia Williams, a respected law enforcement veteran from outside Metro City, had already begun implementing new training protocols, accountability measures, and community outreach programs designed to prevent future corruption. As the celebration wound down, Xavier made his way to the reformed 12th Precinct for a visit that felt surreal after everything that had transpired. The same building where he had been brutally beaten and illegally detained now buzzed with honest officers committed to constitutional policing. Detective Simone Decker, who had been promoted to head the new Internal Affairs Division, greeted Xavier in the main lobby. Her green blouse and professional demeanor reflected the serious commitment to reform that now permeated the department. "Agent Booth, I want you to see what your sacrifice has accomplished," she said, leading him through hallways that looked identical but felt completely different. The booking area, where Xavier had been illegally processed, now displayed posted constitutional rights in multiple languages. The interrogation room where Strickland had tried to break his spirit had been converted into a community liaison office. Every corner of the building reflected the transformation that Xavier's courage had made possible. Young officers approached him throughout the visit, thanking him for cleaning up a department that many honest cops had wanted to reform but didn't know how to tackle. Their genuine gratitude and commitment to ethical policing provided the most meaningful reward Xavier could have received. As the sun set over Metro City, Xavier stood in the precinct parking lot where his undercover operation had begun months earlier. Agent Monica Briggs joined him, both reflecting on how dramatically everything had changed. The same sidewalk where he had posed as a homeless man now bustled with citizens who walked confidently, knowing their police department had been transformed. Was it worth it? Monica asked, knowing the physical and emotional toll the operation had taken on her partner. Xavier smiled, watching honest officers beginning their evening patrol, committed to protecting and serving all citizens equally. Every bruise, every humiliation, every moment of doubt was worth it to see this, he replied. One person's willingness to stand for justice really can transform an entire system. The federal convictions had sent shockwaves through police departments nationwide, serving notice that corruption would face the full force of federal prosecution. But more importantly, they had restored faith in justice for a community that had nearly lost hope. Justice had been served, but more than that, justice had been restored to a system that desperately needed healing, and that restoration began with one FBI agent's courage to endure whatever was necessary to protect the constitutional rights of every citizen he had sworn to serve. 6 months after the corruption scandal that shook Metro City to its core, the fluorescent lights of the J. Edgar Hoover building illuminated a transformation that nobody could have predicted. In a spacious corner office overlooking Pennsylvania Avenue, Assistant Director Xavier Booth adjusted his green button-down shirt and navy blue suit jacket, reviewing the final preparations for what would become the most significant testimony of his career. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows as Xavier examined the congressional hearing documents spread across his mahogany desk. Today he would address the House Judiciary Committee about systematic police corruption and the urgent need for federal oversight. The Metro City operation had exposed a cancer that extended far beyond one precinct, revealing patterns of abuse that demanded national attention. Agent Monica Briggs knocked on the doorframe, her red blazer and black slacks crisp and professional. As Xavier's deputy in the newly formed National Police Corruption Task Force, she had become his most trusted partner in the fight against institutional corruption. Ready for this morning's hearing? Monica asked, carrying a thick briefing folder. Xavier stood, straightening his blue tie. 6 months ago, I was getting beaten in an alley by corrupt cops. Today, I'm telling Congress how to fix the system. Sometimes justice moves in ways we never expect. The hearing room buzzed with anticipation as Xavier took his seat at the witness table. Representatives from both parties leaned forward as he began his testimony, his deep voice carrying the weight of experience and authority. Honorable members of Congress, systematic police corruption isn't just about bad officers making poor choices. It's about institutional failures that allow abuse to flourish unchecked. My undercover operation in Metro City revealed a network of corruption that victimized hundreds of citizens over years, protected by a culture of silence and complicity. Xavier's testimony painted a comprehensive picture of how corruption spreads through departments like a virus. He detailed the financial incentives that rewarded bad behavior, the leadership failures that enabled abuse, and the community impact that destroyed trust between police and citizens. The officers who assaulted me weren't anomalies, Xavier continued. They were products of a system that prioritized loyalty over law, protection over justice. Detective Gavin Strickland didn't become corrupt overnight. He was cultivated by supervisors who rewarded his behavior and protected him from consequences. The representatives asked pointed questions about federal oversight, accountability measures, and the resources needed to combat corruption nationwide. Xavier's responses demonstrated the depth of knowledge gained through his dangerous undercover work and months of analyzing similar problems across the country. Meanwhile, across the country, the FBI Academy in Quantico had integrated Xavier's Metro City operation into its core curriculum. Instructors used his case study to teach new agents about the complexities of undercover work, the courage required to maintain cover under extreme duress, and the systematic approach needed to dismantle corruption networks. In a bright classroom filled with eager recruits, Senior instructor Patricia Hendricks clicked through slides showing Xavier's transformation from decorated FBI agent to convincing homeless man. The students, representing diverse backgrounds and ethnicities, took detailed notes as she explained the psychological challenges of maintaining an undercover identity while enduring physical and verbal abuse. Agent Booth's operation succeeded because he understood that gathering evidence required personal sacrifice, Instructor Hendricks explained. He absorbed brutal treatment not because he was weak, but because he was strong enough to prioritize justice over personal dignity. This level of commitment separates average agents from exceptional ones. Back in Metro City, Detective Tanya Okafor walked through the transformed 12th Precinct, her red uniform shirt and navy pants representing the new era of accountability and community engagement. As the primary liaison between the reformed department and community organizations, she had helped rebuild relationships that corruption had destroyed over decades. The precinct's bright lobby displayed community partnership awards, citizen complaint procedures, and transparency reports that detailed every use of force incident and citizen interaction. Crime rates had dropped 30% as community cooperation increased, proving that honest policing produced better results than corruption ever could. People actually call us now when they see crimes, Detective Okafor explained to a group of visiting police chiefs studying the Metro City reform model. When citizens trust that officers will treat them fairly, they become partners in public safety instead of adversaries. The visiting chiefs examined the precinct's new accountability systems, including body cameras with tamper-proof technology, civilian oversight boards with real authority, and performance metrics that rewarded community engagement over arrest numbers. These innovations, born from Xavier's investigation, were being replicated in departments nationwide. In the federal courthouse downtown, dozens of former inmates walked free as their wrongful convictions were overturned. Public Defender Rebecca Martinez had worked tirelessly to identify cases tainted by the corrupt unit's evidence tampering and perjury. Each exoneration represented a life restored and faith in justice renewed. Marcus Thompson, wrongfully imprisoned for 3 years on drug charges fabricated by Officer Curtis Langley, embraced his family on the courthouse steps. The city's settlement would provide financial compensation, but more importantly, his name was cleared and his children could look up to their father again. Agent Booth's courage gave us our lives back, Marcus told reporters. He proved that truth is stronger than corruption and justice is worth fighting for, even when it seems impossible. Detective Gavin Strickland's federal prison cell offered no such redemption. His appeal had been rejected unanimously, and he faced 23 more years behind bars. Fellow inmates, many of whom had been victimized by corrupt police, ensured that his daily existence reflected the consequences of his choices. The same system he had corrupted now held him accountable with unwavering consistency. The community center bearing Xavier's name had become a beacon of hope in the neighborhood where his assault occurred. Young people from diverse backgrounds participated in programs designed to bridge the gap between law enforcement and communities. The scholarship fund provided opportunities for ethical individuals to pursue careers in criminal justice, ensuring the next generation of officers reflected the communities they served. On graduation day at the police academy, Xavier stood before 30 new recruits whose faces represented every ethnicity and background found in Metro City. His green dress shirt and navy blazer commanded respect as he delivered the oath that would guide their careers. "You are about to swear an oath to protect and serve all citizens equally," Xavier said, his voice carrying both authority and compassion. "That oath doesn't include exceptions for race, economic status, or social position. It means treating every person with the dignity and respect you would want for your own family." The new officers raised their right hands, repeating words that had been transformed from empty ritual to sacred promise through Xavier's example. Their diverse faces reflected hope for a future where police departments truly represented and served their communities. As the ceremony concluded, Xavier felt the weight of transformation he had helped create. His personal sacrifice had produced systemic change that would protect countless citizens for generations to come. Back at FBI headquarters that evening, Xavier reviewed applications from honest officers across the country seeking to join his corruption task force. Each application represented another department ready to confront its problems, another community that might be saved from the abuse he had witnessed in Metro City. Agent Monica Briggs entered with files for their next operation. Intelligence indicated serious corruption problems in a southwestern city where Hispanic citizens faced systematic harassment and abuse. The patterns were depressingly familiar, but Xavier's proven methods offered hope for another successful intervention. Phoenix Police Department has all the warning signs we saw in Metro City, Monica reported. Excessive force complaints, evidence tampering allegations, and community leaders demanding federal investigation. Are you ready for another undercover operation? Xavier studied the intelligence reports, recognizing the same institutional failures that had enabled Detective Gavin Strickland's crimes. Somewhere in Phoenix, corrupt officers were abusing their authority while honest citizens suffered in silence. His task force represented their best hope for justice and reform. Every corrupt department we clean up saves thousands of citizens from abuse, Xavier reflected. Every honest officer we support creates ripples of positive change that spread through communities. The work isn't easy, but it's essential. As he prepared to leave his office, Xavier paused at the window overlooking the city where democracy was born. His journey from decorated agent to assault victim to national reform leader proved that individual courage could indeed transform entire systems. The corruption that once seemed insurmountable was yielding to accountability, transparency, and unwavering commitment to constitutional principles. His phone buzzed with a text from Detective Okafor reporting another successful community partnership initiative in Metro City. Crime continued dropping as trust continued building, creating a positive cycle that validated everything Xavier had sacrificed to achieve. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new corrupt departments to investigate, new communities to protect. But tonight, Xavier Booth could rest, knowing that his courage had lit a flame of justice that would burn long after his own career ended, inspiring future generations of honest officers to choose truth over corruption, service over self-interest, and justice over convenience. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.